bloom where you are planted, or so the saying goes. It's well-meaning enough, similar to the equally popular "when life gives you lemons, make lemonade." Very good. Participatory sermon. The apparent wisdom behind these sentiments is to make the best of a less than ideal situation. Don't get distracted or discouraged by what's going on around you. Just keep on keeping on. Do the best you can with what you're given. Bloom where you are planted. But the problem with that particular phrase, to me at least, assumes that you're planted in the right place. It also assumes that blooming is the goal. The first thing I want to know, one preacher writes, is why a fig tree is in the midst of a vineyard. It's a valid question. Vineyards are for grapes, after all, and figs are not grapes. She goes on to suggest that the fig tree has been planted only so that no inch of the ground is squandered. Now, in reading and interpreting parables, I was always taught that the most important person, or the one who has the most authority in the story, stood in for God. But that becomes a little problematic when you actually look at the landowner in this parable. The landowner doesn't care for the fig tree so much. A waste of soil, he calls it. The landowner is only concerned with what his crops can produce. And if they don't produce, cut it down and plant something that will produce in its place. But where's the grace in that? Where's the Lutheran theology of a God who loves us unconditionally, not for what we do, but what has been done for us? If we're looking for God in this parable, I'm much more drawn to the patience of the gardener who manages to spare the fig tree. Let's give it a little more time, a little more care, some water, sunshine, fertilizer. Let's see what happens then. We know that plants don't and can't bloom and grow on their own. They need external sources: water, sunlight, fertilizer, rich soil. Even so, I struggle with this parable. Even after the patient tending for one more year, what happens next year? What happens if the fig tree never produces any figs? Can the fig tree have any worth even then? Similar with people. We're raised by our parents, grandparents, caregivers, formed by teachers, mentors, friendships, even maybe religious communities. But even with the most nurturing relationships, still we're caught up in a cultural climate that values what we do and what we can contribute, how we can bloom. As the Trappist monk and theologian Thomas Merton puts it, we are so obsessed with doing that we have no time and no imagination left for being. As a result, people are valued not for what they are, but what they do and what they have, for their usefulness. When we meet someone new for the first time after exchanging names and maybe where we grew up, what's usually the very next question? And what do you do for a living? Or if the new acquaintance happens to be a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? Imagine if the answer could be a little different. What do you do for a living? Well, I'm a compassionate human being who strives to embody love and justice in the world. That might raise a few eyebrows at the next dinner party. But what if we could relearn what it means to be worthy? Not for what we do for a living or what we want to be when we grow up, or how long our to-do lists are, or what we can accomplish, but for who we are as beloved children of God, caught up in the great big family of God. If the fig tree never produces figs, I don't think that makes it any less valuable part of the vineyard. Its uses can still be many, even if they're less readily apparent or visible. Maybe the tree becomes shade for the gardener under the noonday sun, or home for birds or other animals. Maybe the tree just exists and breathes, absorbing carbon dioxide from the air and creating oxygen so others around it can breathe and exist also. The parable of the fig tree invites us to reimagine what it means to have worth and to be worthy. What happens to the fig tree next year? Well, the story doesn't tell us. All we know is that the gardener gives it more time now. More care, more water, more sun, more fertilizer now. The gardener does what they can with what they have. We also know it's been this way for 3 years. Who's to say this is the first conversation like this between the gardener and the landowner? Who's to say the same conversation, the same bargaining on behalf of the fig tree won't happen again next year and the year after? Bloom where you are planted. Or maybe, better yet, be where you are planted. None of us is expected to be or do everything. It's the whole point of embracing diversity. We be and do in many different ways. In a homily from November of 1977, less than 3 years before he would be assassinated, Archbishop Oscar Romero, now celebrated as a saint in the Roman Catholic Church and commemorated on our own liturgical calendar every March 24th, preached these words. How beautiful will be the day when all the baptized will understand that their work, their job, is a priestly work. That just as I celebrate Mass at this altar, so each carpenter celebrates Mass at his workbench, and each metal worker, each professional, each doctor with the scalpel, the market woman at her stand, is performing a priestly office. How many cab drivers I know listen to this message in their cabs? You are a priest at the wheel if you work with honesty, consecrating that taxi of yours to God, bearing a message of peace and love to the passengers who ride in your cab. Romero never suggested that everyone should become a priest, nor did he expect a medical doctor to know the first thing about running a produce stand or driving a taxi. None of us is expected to do it all or be it all. We are worthy not for what we do or produce or for what we can contribute, but because we are loved wholly and unconditionally by God. And God, who loves us, invites us in each moment to do the thing we are moved to do, to embody love and justice in the place where we are, however we can, with whatever we have, entrusting the rest to God. God, who loves us and cares for us, invites us to be, and maybe to bloom, where we are planted.